Hi, my name is Mark Andrew, and I'm from Kitchener, Ontario, Canada. And I'd like to wish my Canadian and, heck, even my American friends, even though it's early for you, a happy Thanksgiving. Celebrating most of the major holidays has been kind of awkward for me for about 12 years now. That's when I left behind the fundamentalist evangelical Christianity that I was both born into and personally believed. The question now is, what to do with the holidays, like Thanksgiving, Easter, and Christmas. Let's start with today, Thanksgiving. A question that could be, and perhaps has been posed to me over the years is, if you don't believe in the God you once believed in, who are you grateful to? My answer is kind of nuanced, but first I'd say that those of us who find ourselves in the Unitarian, Progressive Christian, or Humanist Atheist camps who don't believe in the three-tiered universe of heaven, earth, and hell with the Supreme Being reigning over it, well, it doesn't necessarily mean there isn't a spiritual component to ourselves, or that we don't relate to this spirituality. There are so many ways of believing in God, and we do well to remember that. As I was sitting in the service at my Unitarian congregation this morning, Grand River Unitarian Congregation of Waterloo in Kitchener, Ontario, it rocks, by the way, one word that kept coming to mind is mystery. For the things I have in my life, I am grateful to the mystery and happy to live in that mystery. Another thing that I noticed around me was the vibrant community around me, and the diverse range of people who gather together every Sunday to truly care and show compassion to one another. Yet you might only count on one hand those who believe in a supreme being. Do I need someone to be grateful to? No, I don't think that I do. But still, I think gratitude should be something that we practice daily. And today I looked around and I was grateful. I was grateful for the people who shared during our joys and sorrows time of the service, and for the words of our minister, and for the deeper conversations that I had afterward at coffee hour. My heart was full of gratitude, yet I didn't need that gratitude to be directed at anyone in particular. It was a feeling, and it can be an attitude. Off the top of my head, I can think of a lot more to be thankful for. I am thankful for the small group of family and friends who I can tell pretty much anything to, and they would never stop loving me. I am grateful for the political and religious organizations that I am part of. I am grateful for the roof over my head, for a good internet connection, for food to eat. I am grateful for humor. I'm grateful for Scarlett Johansson, and for dark beer. I'm also grateful for diversity. I am grateful that I can simply be grateful without a religious overtone. Briefly, I'd like to mention a problem with being grateful to a supreme being for providing good health, or a job promotion, or having decent transportation. If you're going to thank this God for providing you with these things, you also better be ready for the questions such as, why didn't this God heal Margaret of cancer? Or why did the 50-something father of 4 lose his job after 30 years? Or why do some people in Africa walk for miles just for a bucket of water? There are all sorts of conundrums when you enter a supreme being God into the equation. Next, I'd like to read something from the History Channel about the first Thanksgiving. In September 1620, a small ship carrying the Mayflower left Plymouth, England, carrying 102 passengers, an assortment of religious separatists seeking a new home where they could freely practice their faith, and other individuals lured by the promise of prosperity and land ownership in the New World. After a treacherous and uncomfortable crossing that lasted 66 days, they dropped anchor near the tip of Cape Cod, far north of their intended destination at the mouth of the Hudson River. 1 month later, the Mayflower crossed Massachusetts Bay, where the Pilgrims, as they are now commonly known, began the work of establishing a village at Plymouth. Throughout that first brutal winter, most of the colonists remained on board the ship, where they suffered from exposure, scurvy, and outbreaks of contagious disease. Only half of the Mayflower's original passengers and crew lived to see their first New England spring. In March, the remaining settlers were moved ashore, where they received an astonishing gift from an Abenaki Indian who greeted them in English. Several days later, he returned with another Native American, Squanto, a member of the Pawtuxet tribe, who had been kidnapped by an English sea captain and sold into slavery before escaping to London and returning to his homeland on an exploratory expedition. Squanto taught the Pilgrims, weakened by malnutrition and illness, how to cultivate corn, extract sap from maple trees, catch fish in the rivers, and avoid poisonous plants. He also helped the settlers forge an alliance with the Wampanoag, a local tribe, which would endure for more than 50 years, and tragically remains one of the sole examples of harmony between European colonists and Native Americans. In November 1621, after the Pilgrims' first corn harvest proved successful, Governor William Bradford organized a celebratory feast and invited a group of the fledgling colony's Native American allies, including the Wampanoag chief Massasoit. Now remembered as America's first Thanksgiving, although the Pilgrims themselves may not have used the term at the time, this festival lasted for 3 days. While no record exists of the historic banquet's exact menu, the Pilgrim chronicler Edward Winslow wrote in his journal that Governor Bradford sent 4 men on a fowling mission in preparation for the event, and that the Wampanoag guests arrived bearing 5 deer. Historians have suggested that many of the dishes were likely prepared using traditional North American spices and cooking methods. Because the Pilgrims had no oven and the Mayflower's sugar supply had dwindled by the fall of 1621, the meal did not feature pies, cakes, or other desserts, which have become a hallmark of contemporary celebrations. There are a couple of lessons that can be learned from this time in history. Firstly, the reason the Pilgrims were fleeing to the colonies was to escape religious persecution. They desired a safe place to practice their faith. And while I am not claiming that those of us who no longer believe in a supreme being are being treated as badly as the Native Americans were, we are continually seeking a place in the religious spectrum and dialogue in 2012. It can be a rough road, and progressive Christians, Unitarians, humanists, and atheists can be called godless heathens without morals who are going to hell. Another lesson that can be learned is from the cooperation between the Pilgrims and the Native Americans that resulted in the first Thanksgiving. Just as they taught each other things not previously conceived, perhaps there can be discussion between more conservative Christians and those of other faiths, and those of us who have chosen other paths. I say perhaps, because I have found that unfortunately this is not always the case. I guess I would conclude by saying that those of us in the Unitarian, Progressive Christian, or Atheist camps perhaps are more grateful for rather than grateful to, at least when it comes to the divine. We're more comfortable with everything not having to be solidified. We're comfortable with mystery, but we surely recognize things to be grateful for when we see and experience them. So whoever you are, let me wish you a very happy Thanksgiving. I'm Mark and Andrew from Kitchener, Ontario.